Welcome to the Speaking Podcast. You can find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. We're also on BitChute and YouTube, Speaking Podcast. I also have the Awakening Podcast, the Meditation Podcast, Learn Polish Podcast, and the new Crypto Podcast, and all can be found on roycollin.com. Today, my guest, all the way from Boston, which I have been to, beautiful Boston. Welcome to Boston. So please welcome Sophie Wadsworth.
Thank you, Roy. It's great to be with you on Speaking Podcast.
So you might let the audience know who's Sophie.
Well, I'm a writer and a mother, and recently an executive leader in the nonprofit world. And I'm now also a coach and consultant. So working with leaders and all kinds of professionals who want to improve the way they speak to their team, speak to keynote audiences, make pitches to investors, that sort of thing. So a woman of many hats.
Oh, excellent. And I know that you were a teacher when you were young, but I'd like to know prior to that, what was your kind of speaking journey when you were a child, or how did you get into speaking? I mean, obviously teaching you have no choice, but how were you in school?
Yeah, well, we'll get to the teaching, what those ninth graders taught me. Well, as a kid, I was just telling a story recently for a program called Stories from the Stage. And it's about how my sister and I, growing up in New York City, played tackle football. Now that's American football. So we had on all the pads and the helmets and such. And it was an all boys team. And as we rode the van, let us just say that the boys were less than friendly some of the time. So my first speaking coach was my mother, helping me figure out how to talk back to the boys on the bus. And my sister would kind of cower behind me, really happy that I was able to, just sort of parrot back what the boys said. I would just sort of say it twice and louder, whatever they said, so that I didn't have to think about it. And I guess I evolved from there as a speaker, not to just to be echoing, but I did some plays when I was a kid, Roy. Now that I think of it, I really enjoyed being on the stage. Some of them were singing musicals and stuff like that. And then I guess what really made the shift was teaching, that I was in front of a classroom of ninth graders and I had to hold their attention. And
how old are ninth graders? Because that's kind of an American thing. What age are ninth graders?
Yes, they're in the realm of 14, 15 years old.
Yeah, a kind of monkey brain at that stage. They're not paying much attention.
Yeah, a co-teacher of mine described it. It's a little bit like popcorn. They're all over the place, and the beginning of the year, they make a big transition to the end. They really, I think, grow up a lot. 10th graders here quite, I think, more settled. They're wonderful ages, but, all the high school ages. Anyway, I had to hold the room and make the material engaging and figure out sort of what my voice was as a teacher. I was in my early 20s. And I think that's where I really cut my teeth with public speaking, was in front of those ninth graders who didn't always want to be talking about reading and writing and the book that we were discussing and all that. So, and it evolved from there that I've always taught through the years. And I got so, what's the word? Just enchanted with writers, particularly poetry. At the end of college, I had an amazing teacher and I just kind of got hooked without realizing it on poetry. And so I focused in my spare time on writing poems, and eventually wrote a collection of poems, and then would do readings at bookstores and such. So I think that's where I felt like I was more in the public. Teaching ninth grade, it's a pretty captive audience, but when you're giving a reading in a bookstore or at a conference or something, it's a little different. And that was a lot of fun. I realized I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed, sharing something, from my life experience, sort of painting a picture with words for people, giving them a chance to step into a different scene than they might have ever been in. So I think that's where I really, blossomed as a public speaker.
I'm currently reading Brain Rules, a book, and the guy is basically a professor, a university professor. And what he's saying is like, and he's talking about uni, because I think you've done university stuff as well. And he's basically saying like 10 minutes is all you've got. Then they start, laptop opening up and everything. Did you notice that, especially with the ninth graders, that, you can't just go in and start doing something. You have to kind of switch it up a bit. Did you have strategies for kind of, because I mean, that's going to apply to anybody who's speaking with an audience, because the ninth graders grow up, but they're still the same. Like, I mean, people's attention span, the phone is out straight away,
Yeah, well, it's funny to think back to that time, and thank you for the question. It's a great question. And I'll see how I answer it this time. I think there's probably quite a few similarities between those ninth graders and us adults in terms of what we need. And I think the best thing that I gave them as I stood up in front of the class, especially on the days when they didn't want to really engage, they had their mind in other places, was that I was very present and very passionate about the material, and very determined to find ways to make a link with them, to find ways that they could relate to the material and bring it into their sort of language and their understanding, maybe through analogies, or even sometimes by digressions, by just talking about something that they could relate to and then come back around to the material in some way. And certainly trying to make them laugh was one of my best strategies. Now, sometimes I did that without meaning to. I would get so caught up in what I was doing. I would like walk around the room and I would be knocking into the furniture, and they would think that was so funny. And then I realized, well, that's good, because if they're laughing and I'm a klutz knocking into the chair while I'm talking, that lightens them up and they're with me, right? They're what she's going to do next. They may not be realizing they're also learning stuff about English, but they're watching to see what I'm going to do next or what I'm going to say next. So those are a couple strategies that are still true today. Sharing material I'm passionate about, looking for ways to make people laugh, looking for ways to laugh at myself. A lot of good material there.
I think definitely, I mean, I do that a lot. I mean, I think if you can laugh at yourself, people kind of connect better with you, because they go, yeah, that person can laugh at themselves, because a lot of people can't. The ego gets in the way.
Yeah.
So you've done like executives for leaders. So like you were working kind of in the corporate sector, or was it just training? What's the kind of the link there? How are you?
So right now I'm working both one-on-one and in groups with people in the corporate space, and especially with people who want to put together a keynote talk. They have a big event or a pitch. I had a chance to coach a scientist who was going for a multi-million-dollar grant and was doing a pitch for that in front of a panel of experts. And some of it was just like a 30-minute presentation with slides in front of these people, some of whom she didn't know. It was on Zoom, as it is these days. And then there was Q&A. So I helped her also get ready for, well, how do you field those questions? How do you get ready for the curveballs that inevitably come, the one you're not ready for? And it's the same with people in companies, in the financial sector or the biotech sector, or or even entrepreneurs. They're trying to figure out, well, yeah, how do I just sort of stay here in the moment when my mind is going other places? How do I keep focused, keep with the person I'm talking to? Yeah, so what I find is some of those same principles that I've really enjoyed exploring all along in poetry: how to bring people into the present moment, how to paint a picture and create a scene with detail, how to stay focused on what you want to say and also listen at the same time. I mean, a tip for your listeners, if they don't already have it figured out, how to guide themselves through doing a presentation or even a Q&A, is to just have those Post-it notes or those flashcards as you're practicing, and just practice. so that you have those bits. Not so that they're canned, but so that they're in you enough that you're ready to share when the moment comes. And also that you're really smooth on the parts that are most important to you. So I work with leaders to think about, well, how do they efficiently practice? How do they make those sort of headlines for themselves, that they can follow along when they get off, track a little with a question or get nervous or whatever. How do they come back to, if nothing else, I want the audience to take this piece away. And I guess the other thing that's really fun about working with people in the corporate space is inviting them to think about what kind of emotional connection can they nurture in their audience, whoever it is, whether it's a team meeting in the organization or if it's stakeholders or an audience, as I said, at a keynote, really thinking about what they want the audience to feel. I mean, I don't know, you think about that, Roy, like what you want your listeners to feel or how you want your guests to feel? Is that something you think about?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's like I kind of gear it to, I know that there's people that aspire to start speaking, but there's also the listeners that are trying to sharpen the saw and they want to be better. And it's like everything that we're discussing kind of helps. And so I'm constantly thinking of them. I mean, I'm learning myself as well because, I want to be better. I always want to be better, but I know that by the questions that I ask, there's plenty of others that would go, oh, yeah, that's interesting, so.
Yeah, so I think about that a lot. And as I'm coaching people, think, what do you want the audience to feel? Like, if nothing else, they walk away feeling like this, and then kind of work backwards. How are you going to help them feel that way? Maybe they want them to feel engaged. It's especially hard these days when even more meetings are on video, and how do you make them feel engaged, whether it's asking them questions or telling them an anecdote that they might really enjoy hearing. I know one person started sharing in her team meetings social media posts that had gone viral. She just used them to mix it up. She got them from other people in the company. Not that it was illustrating the data that was her big responsibility to share, but it just lightened the mood. And it had to do with the corporate culture, right? And it was something that was kind of out there in the world and it was fun. So that was a way she was helping them feel like, okay, this is engaging. I never know it's like the ninth grade thing again. I don't know what she's going to share next, so I'm going to keep listening because maybe the social media, I better not check my phone. I might miss the social media bit that she's going to share. Or some anecdote, to help them just feel, kind of in the moment. A little spontaneity can go a long way in this life.
Brilliant. And when somebody is pitching, because I know a lot of people, they're trying to, pitch to investors. And as you said, the questions, I find the people that throw the curveball are the ones that are out anyway. They're just trying to be slimy and try to show their weight and try to show that they're great. What kind of tips do you give the person to deal with the question that they're not expecting? Because it's great making a list of 50 questions you think you're going to get, but you can be sure they'll throw something that you're like, oops, yeah, next time round, brilliant, you build it in your arsenal. But during that time, what would you kind of tell somebody to do?
That's a great question, Roy. Well, I would say it's very helpful to breathe. That's first. The brain just needs oxygen in those moments because that old fight or flight comes back. It's not actually a buffalo coming at us, but you sort of feel like, oh, what do I do? What do I say? Or something might shut down and you just don't have any words. One phrase I like to offer people, if you really need to buy a little time to get yourself back into your thinking, is thank you for that question or interesting question, and tell me more. I want to think about how to really explain this in the way that's most helpful. Tell me more about what you're curious about, or tell me more when you ask, and you can repeat the question back so that your brain can take the question in. So when you ask what would be helpful to people when they get a curveball, are you interested in getting sort of like what they say next? Are you interested in how they work with themselves internally? I'm just curious. And that will buy you some time so that you can actually formulate your answer, and it gives you a chance to hear, well, what do they actually want to know? Or are they just throwing you a curveball? The simple version of that, instead of repeating a bit of the question and asking them to elaborate on the question, is just to say, if it's really a curveball and it feels sneaky, is to say, in this gentle way, you don't want to be too assertive with this, but you just want to say, wow, Roy, why do you say that? Or tell me more about what leads you to ask about that. And that, again, is like, you can have a little script of that little bit, why do you say that? Or tell me a little bit more about what leads you to ask that question. And it just buys you the time to figure out how you're going to answer it. If you have a quick sense of humor, a sense of humor is great if you feel like someone's being sneaky. If there's some way in the moment, again, without being aggressive, but if there's some way in the moment, you can just make a joke, like, I have no idea. Wow, the screen's coming up blank here. Let me find my mouse. Whatever, in the moment, to make light of it, is good, because then you're back in power, right? You're back in power. You're in community with people. You're saying something funny. You're not going to take them too seriously. It depends on who's asking the question, of course. And what the power structure is.
Sometimes, like, the investors, they're not, like, sometimes there's friends there, but there's other times where they're not, they're kind of competing. Yes. And by using the sense of humor, especially when they're out, as you say, not insulting them, but just kind of, then I'll go, I like this guy, and you could be opening doors instead of closing them. So you just don't know, because sometimes you don't know the list of investors that are there. Sometimes, there is times where you will know, but there's other times you won't. And you just have to kind of, I think, go with your intuition as well at times.
Yes. And it can be practiced. You can have a stock phrase or two before a certain meeting that you're going to use. Whoa, fantastic question. Let me get up into fifth gear here. Now that's not that funny, but you can have your version of it. But it is. I like it. I like it. I've been on a bicycle. I need to get in a Ferrari to answer that question, right? Yeah. Using metaphor, and maybe it's a metaphor that is connected to what you're pitching. Oh, I've been using a number 2 pencil here. I gotta get out my whatever, fill in the blank.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, excellent. Yeah. So you mentioned about helping people with the keynotes, because some people are doing it, they're not doing it great, and some people want to do it. So what's the tips and tricks for the keynotes that you can share with us?
Tips and tricks for a keynote. Well, again, it depends on the audience. So I would say, a central question in any talk that you're giving to an audience is, think about, who are they? Why are they here listening to you? What are they hoping to walk away with? And kind of, where are they coming from? I mean, if you can make it relatable, you have their attention and can work from there. So that's the first thing I would say for a keynote, is really tuning into that audience and what is going to be the most relatable way to share what you've got. The other thing I find helpful is really considering not only how you want the audience to feel, but what do you want them to think about? This is kind of going back to the headlines. But when they walk away, when they head out to the coffee break, what do you want them to walk away with? Because the research says, the percentage of what people really remember and take in from what we're saying is very small, compared to what we might hope, right? So if we are really focused and conscious of what we want them to think about, we can find ways to weave that into the talk multiple times, and to, I guess, elevate the place of that material and put detail around it so that it will really stick. So I love story, and I believe that story is one of the most powerful ways we can share any information. And so, when I share that well, let's say I share with you, I teach high school, and I taught the kids how to question authority, right? Just question how these adults are saying things, and it may not be the gospel truth. And I attach a story to that. And I say, well, you all have been talking about this neighborhood. This is when I taught near Seattle, in a place called Tacoma, Washington. Kids kept talking about this really bad neighborhood called The Hill. And we had more kids that year from the inner city. And I thought, well, gee, I know where The Hill is, but I've never been there. And I don't think it's really that bad. Of course, I grew up in New York City, so it's like they didn't really know what my frame of reference was. But I'm thinking they're really talking down a lot about this neighborhood, like it's a place you're just going to get killed if you walk into it. And so I decided to head into that neighborhood on a Saturday and just check it out. So just put on some simple clothes and walk down the street, and nothing of great interest happened. Some people talked to me. One guy slowed down his car to chat. I said hi and just kept walking like I was on a mission. And I went back to the class and I told them that. I said, I was really curious about The Hill and what kind of neighborhood it was. And didn't want to take your word for it, that it was such a dangerous place. And I'm an adult, so I can make these decisions. And, this is what it was like. That's the thing they remembered. So I could say question authority all day long and don't take things as given and test out things for yourself, but that's what they remembered. And kids talked to me about that story years later. And it kind of gave me street cred with them, street credibility. And so I offer that up for people who are thinking about a keynote. What is the story with some detail? I didn't give you a lot of detail there, but if I was fleshing out the story, I would tell you it was up on a hill and you could see the docks and the tanker ships in Tacoma from there. And you could see the smoke coming out of some of the stacks in a factory down along the shore. And the car that pulled up was a beat up Mustang. And the houses had porches and people were sitting there on the porches on lawn chairs, those lawn chairs with that kind of red and green and white webbing. And the metal slats and such, so that people get a feeling for what it was like to walk through the hill. And it was a hot day, but I had my hood up, and this is before hoodies were cool. So that people are with me as I'm
I probably
walking
thought you were the criminal in the place.
Yeah, that was sort of my goal, is not to look like a 22-year-old, like goody two shoes. Like who was lost or something. So anyway, whatever the scenario is, give us the smell of the coffee, give us the whiteboard, whatever it is, you know what I mean? The blue upholstered office chairs, give us some details so we can be in the space, or the factory floor, whatever it is. Give us a couple details we can see and smell and hear so that the story is stickier. And it's like packaging for your most important idea.
Brilliant. And I wish every single teacher would teach their students that, because now somebody watches something on CNN and they start believing it, not only believing it, but regurgitating it and attacking others who have done proper research. And so, question everything.
Yeah, multiple sources are good. Even on your own parents, So all you kids out there listening.
Exactly. So with the presentations then, because does people do it all different ways? Some people just have the picture, some people have the one word, and we've all seen somebody has the full sentence where people are reading what they're saying. What do you advise your people to do for a decent presentation?
So for visual presentations, well, I guess my mantra is really less is more. For myself, I long to connect with the speaker. So it's a joy here as we're talking that I get to be like looking at you, seeing your expressions as we go. And if you started flashing up lots of words for the questions you were asking. I wouldn't be as engaged as when I'm hearing you. And I would keep that in mind, that, our visual tools have a place, and usually less is more. I have not coached anyone yet where I said, you just do not have enough material yet. Usually folks have too much. So I would just say, try to look at your material through that lens and say, are there pieces I could say instead of sharing in words? Are there photographs? Because photographs are powerful. And if there are they doing the work I want them to do? Are they illustrating sort of as best they can the thing that I'm trying to share? Can I put in a little clip that's animated or a video? Or even can I use colors differently? So aside from making sure there's not just too much of the visual material, look at the colors you're using and think, well, is there a logo or branding I want to pick up on? Is there a feeling that I want to give through color? Blue and green, giving more calm, orange or pink or red, giving more energy and sort of creative juice. Even a question like that, to look through a visual presentation and think about color, can make a big difference. Maybe you can put a border or a banner that's so simple, you just do it and it's there throughout. And just give it a little more liveliness. So those are a few thoughts that come to mind, as far as just using them sort of sparingly. More, I say more like spices and condiments rather than the main course, because the main course is you and how you're delivering the material. And the visuals, certainly like for data, it helps to have a chart and such, but it's usually more powerful if they get to look at you and you're gesturing and you're putting your feeling behind the material and you're telling a story about the data. And then you've got your charts, your words, your pictures as you need them.
Yeah, excellent. And I know you've done stuff for fundraising as well, because, like some people, obviously the people trying to get fundraising done and maybe the person that's actually trying to do it. What can you share with us that has helped in that area?
Well, if you don't mind, Roy, let me ask you a question. Tell me a bit about your audience. What do you think their situations are that involve seeking donations or seeking investments from folks?
You see, you don't know the exact person, but some people would like, if they're working for, say, a nonprofit, because I know I've had even some people that have been on that work for a nonprofit. So I know that if even like, because I always think that people should give back. If you've got an ability for speaking skill, don't just do it for take. If you have an ability, you can help a charity or an organization, use your voice. And I know that some people want to do that, but there's times, they don't really, it's a different skill set, and it's kind of, some people are afraid to ask for money. And that's where, so obviously I know that you've got the experience in that, so you must enlighten us.
Oh, well, let's see. Well, I'll say that if people want to inspire others to give to a cause or to invest in their company, one of the most important things they can do is to get really clear about the impact that is going to have, right? And think about a story around that. So what is the story of the person whose life will be improved by that donation? What is the story of the customer who will have a better experience in the world or with a product thanks to this investor's decision to invest in you? And that story, like a container for the truth of your sort of mission for asking for their support, will stay with them and let them know that their money is helping somebody. So I would start there with, what's a story of the world as it will be thanks to their donation? Your business as it will be thanks to their investment. And also give us a character, give us that person as, a living, breathing person with some detail. What is that person's circumstance such that they stand to benefit from this nonprofit's work? Or what is the customer's predicament that they are in need of this product or this service? Because we all can connect with need, and longing and challenges. So if you can paint a picture of what that person is facing and how your work with this, possible investor or donor support will make change, then that person, can be motivated and can see, oh, this is where it's going to go. And you could even start with that. You could start with, once, this person receives our services, they go on and get their high school diploma, or they're able to put food on the table for their family, or whatever the mission is. And then work backwards from that. And how do we get there? Where did they start? Well, they started like this, in a single family household, or, moving every 2 years, and, and just never having enough money for food on the table, or whatever the problem is. Again, this applies to business owners as well as folks in the nonprofit space. So reflecting on, that vision of where we want to help improve others' lives, and then giving also the picture of where did they begin, what are the circumstances, so that we can connect with it, right? And it doesn't mean we have to know what it was like to have been food insecure, to not have had enough food on the table, or to have moved around and had, great disruption. But we all know what it's like to be in physical pain, right? And to be lacking. And making it simple and human and relatable is a great place to start. That's what comes to mind first, is really getting clear on, who we're talking about helping here. And and trying to share that in a way that's really relatable and human, because ultimately, the sort of wisdom that was given to me when I was early on in fundraising as a nonprofit executive was that people give to other people through people. So there can be all the data and statistics in the world, but ultimately the donor or the investor is parting with their resources and giving them to this cause so that they can help someone else, someone they can't see right now. And they're doing that through you, another person. So they need to trust you and know that you understand the story and that you're connected and caring. And that I would also add, Roy, that knowing that you as the person asking cares about the donor or the investor, right? That ultimately a fundraiser is giving someone an opportunity to make change in the world, right? And so we're in this privileged place if we're asking for someone's investment to help them do that. It's like we're the go-between. And so caring about them and their interests. What interests you in this cause and this mission? Or how did you hear about us? Those kind of questions are very powerful. In fact, I would always recommend that you start with conversation and questions about the person, if you can. Some people just want to get down to it. But if you can, ask them questions about themselves and what draws them to this work, and what their interests are, so that you can connect with them at that level. Because there's a reason that you're in the conversation. There's a reason that they want to make this difference. And it's not the same as all the other donors' reasons. They've got unique reasons.
Beautiful. Yeah, those. So I know that you're a coach for public speaking and storytelling, and obviously, I can see from our conversation that you're a fantastic storyteller. So you might tell people about your coaching and then how they can get in contact with you.
Sure. Well, it's a joy talking with you, Roy. And I would add about my coaching. Hopefully, folks have got a little sense of my style. I ask folks a lot of questions to understand where their challenges are for speaking, whether it's giving a big speech or whether it's doing better strategic communications within their organization, or even as an entrepreneur, how do they share their message and their potential with other people. So folks work with me one-on-one. I offer webinars so that people can improve their skills as storytellers and speakers, and sort of level up their presentations. Folks can find me on my website, which is my name, sophiewadsworth.com. I'm also out there on LinkedIn and Twitter. So just drop me an email, and would love to chat more about whatever folks' needs might be. I always love to talk about speaking and storytelling.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much, Sophie. And I'll make sure I'll put all the links in the podcast description, both on the audio and the video. So that's all for the speaking.
Thank you, Roy.
No problem at all. That's all for the Speaking Podcast. You can find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com or on BitChute and YouTube at Speaking Podcast. Be sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, a nice review. It all helps. Share with your friends. Until next week, take care.